Welcome to another episode with your host, Robert E. Hansen, psychic medium, author, and public speaker.
Hi, welcome back. Today we're talking about the water bowl. Many years ago, I had spent a lot of time around the Japanese monasteries, the Zen monasteries, not only here in the States, but I also spent some time in the country of Japan. I've always been drawn to meditation and towards the practice of the Japanese disciplines, the martial arts, which I involved myself with for over 45 years. And part of the odyssey, part of the journey that many people like to take, if they're training in martial arts especially, is to visit the home country where their root systems are born. For certain people, that's in Korea. Other people, it could be in Thailand. Other people, it could be in China. And in my case, I came out of a very interested background from the Chinese/the Japanese culture, but the main thrust was in the Japanese culture. A big piece of the Eastern philosophies is the practice of Zen Buddhism, various types of Zen. One of the questions that sometimes comes up, and it comes up kind of frequently, frankly, in many of the practices, is what happens when a person dies? When someone physically dies, what becomes of them? What becomes of what we speak about in terms of the soul or the spirit of the being? Where does that go? What happens to it? And depending upon the religious systems, the belief structures, the answers to that very large question can be all over the place. I mean, in the Christian culture, for example, they speak of heaven, and in some cases they speak of purgatory, other times they speak of hell. In other religious groups, they refer to a place that has no real destination. You're kind of in a holding pattern, as it were, waiting for the Messiah, for God to actually rise up once again and be reborn into the world and decide where people go, coming and going. For other people, they believe they have gone to another dimension, another level of existence. And the list is quite endless of places that are described as, well, when people die, they go there. For the average Judeo-Christian person, I think it's not uncommon for someone to suggest that they go to this place called heaven, right? It's very common. People say, my mom's in heaven, my brother's in heaven. And if you ask people, where is that place? Some people point up, some people point down, some people point left, some people point right. Some say, I don't know. Others say, I'm sure of it. The combination and the variations are quite different. So this question was presented to the Roshi being the name given to an enlightened person who comes out of the Zen tradition, and it's equivalent fundamentally to a Jewish rabbi or a Catholic priest. They have a stature in the Zen community. They are considered to be enlightened, meaning they have an illumination that has been born within them, in many cases through very strict, tough, disciplined practice, sitting in meditation for years and years, practicing various forms of breathing technique, practicing various forms of what is known as koan, K-O-A-N, koan, which are kind of riddles, parables, if you will, to demand that the thinking mind kind of go away and that it gives birth or rise to another impression or another level of consciousness that is beyond all thinking. And that attracted me quite a bit. That's one of the reasons why it pulled me into the Zen practice. Because no matter how much I thought about, no matter how much I structured my thinking, no matter how many ways I kind of inherited ideas that I thought were attractive to me, it never really kind of satiated me in a way. It didn't kind of strike me as, well, this is it. Because the experiences that I was receiving were pretty much either schooled into me, taught into me. They showed me pictures or paintings or something. And they said, this is what happens to you. This is what happens to you. And yet, as when I studied over these different faith systems over my lifetime, really, I'm not deeply examining them, but I'm curious about a lot of the Native American culture and so on. They all seemed to point to the similar place, but at the same time, no one was really giving me a specific. And I know it's very hard to talk about specifics when we're talking about a, quote, place that no one has been to yet, or they claim they've been there, perhaps have returned, but once again, it raises doubts and questions and curiosities, and that's all really, really good. Anyway, so we're sitting in the Zendo. The Zendo is the name given to the facility. That's the place that the Zen masters literally do their work. They teach. They give a term that sometimes is called darshan. Darshan meaning they're giving a talk. And this talk is given at an express level of consciousness to the listening student. And depending upon the listening student, or a member of the Sangha. The Sangha is the term used for the community of people that are in practice. It's like the congregation of people that gather in the name of a certain effort in the certain process and practice of the Zen work. So one day we're sitting and this question comes up with the Zen master, and the question is raised, Master or Roshi, we have been talking about death and dying, and can you please explain to the class or to the Sangha or to the group really what does occur when we physically die? All right. And the master smiled politely and began to give a very soft, gentle conversation about it. And he went on to explain that, of course, when the human form dies, when the being itself dies, when the actual organism perishes, it dissolves. Some people use the term ashes to ashes, dust to dust, that kind of a thing. He's talking about the same thing. And he says, when the body dies, in the Oriental tradition, in many cases, the body is buried. Many people think it's cremated. That's more of the Indian culture. It does happen in the Japanese cultures as well, but it's not as pervasive. It's not as predominant. And the Chinese culture, it's the same. There are many cemeteries in Japan. And a lot of the cemeteries not only are very beautifully maintained, but the headstones can be extremely ornamented. They have pictures etched to them. The writing is beautiful. There's plenty of flowers. And a big part of that cultural offering is the incense. They love to burn incense. They believe it's a fragrance. The smoke rises up to heaven. And it's really quite a beautiful thing to see. And there are times throughout the Japanese culture that they have the various festivals. And some of you may have seen it where they take lanterns and they set them out on the water and they light them and the lanterns float away. In other cases, they take lanterns and they light them and they lift them up into the air because of the heat inside, elevates the lantern, and they fly off into the distance. And that really has to be done in a safe setting around, a big waterway or something, so there's no risk of anyone's home getting burned or something. But it's not uncommon for these folks to really honor the dead person. They really believe in it. There's a lot of bowing. There's a lot of ritual. It's a very, very beautiful thing to see, and it maintains a tradition for these folks that has gone on for centuries after centuries after centuries. So once the rituals were set aside, once the gongs stopped ringing, once the bowing and the prostrations have ended, once the incenses, come quiet, the question is then asked, what becomes of us? And at this point, I thought the Zen master made a very, very, very beautiful, simplistic explanation. And what he did was he took a large glass bowl, like a big fish tank, not square, but it was kind of rounded, like a large goldfish bowl, but big. And this bowl was filled with water. The bowl was filled with water, and it was crystal clear. You could see into the, clear. It was crystal clear. There was no interruption. Then, on the other hand, he had this little small clear glass, and in that glass was water as well. And he said to the group of us, he said, "You see this little glass here? That are you guys. Each one of you sees yourself as being a separate glass of water. You have your own thoughts, you have your own emotions, you have your own ideas, you have your own appearances, your skin color, your references. You all have this sense of being separate individuals, uniquely set apart." And that, he explained, is just the egoic mind describing itself to itself. But he said that there is something much deeper that the average person is not aware of, and he referred to this word called consciousness, or the big mind. He said most people have the little mind. They're self-contained in this personal box, and everything that occurs just moves through this little box, meaning the being, the self. He then held up the glass. The class was really riveted like I was. I was watching everything, of course. And he throws this glass of water into the larger bowl. And he said to one of the students, one of the members of the Sangha, he said, "Could you please tell me or look into the bowl and tell me where you are?" And the student said, "Well, I mean, I know I'm in there. I saw you throw me in, but I can't see me. I'm not separate like I was in the world. In the world, I could say there's me. I'm 5'10", I weigh 170 pounds. I have, brown hair and blue eyes, and, I speak Spanish. That's me, that guy." And he says, yeah, that's in the world. That's true. That's this kind of sense of separation, the separate entity. But he said, in reality, after you die, I'm throwing you back into the universe, or what many people would call heaven. And he says, when you enter into this place called heaven, can you see yourself uniquely in there? And the answer, of course, is no. And he said, that's what happens to you. Your consciousness, after the body is released, simply re-expands again and falls back into the universal one consciousness, the stream or the river of all life, which some people would call God. And that is as clear as an explanation that I've heard from anyone in a very, very long time. He simply said, water, the river returns back into the ocean. And that made crystal clear sense to the whole class. So we saw right then and there with this very simple example that when physical death comes, the body itself will fall, it will be cremated, it will be buried in the earth, perhaps placed in some vault or up in a mountainside or cast out on the ocean or something. That's the physical remains. But the essence, which people call the soul or the spirit, in my universe called the consciousness, it simply returns back to the source. And what is beautiful about this, that source contains all of the energy, all of the love, all of the compassion that those around you have contained throughout your entire upbringing. All the people that you love that have physically crossed over are also and have also returned into this fish bowl, this beautiful, clear crystal bowl in which this reunion of love and compassion takes place. And we have shed the body, and we have entered the world beyond all worlds, this timeless dimension beyond all space, beyond all understanding. Thus the expression, you will return to the peace beyond all understanding. Thank you for tuning in.